at the time where this car was built, all the statesmen had one, and almost all Formula One drivers had this one here as a daily driver. Why? This vehicle here was considered at that time the best car in the world. Why is that? What can Mercedes maybe learn from this vehicle here to transport it back into new vehicles? And how good is this one here still, the very iconic W126, the Mercedes S-Class in this very generation from 1979 to 1991. And this one here is the top spec model. Actually, yeah, the most popular one, so to speak, from today's perspective. This one here is the 560 SEL with the 5.5 liter V8. And we're going to tell you all about this. This will be an iconic ride together with Thomas Nautical Fuel in 4K, full screen, full length. Let's go. And this generation here, of course, typical S-Class and Mercedes at that time, the freestanding star, beautiful look. And this generation still has the very classic, iconic design here with the headlamps in the front. Beautiful small wipers here also for the headlamps. And this vehicle was not only a design icon, by the way, designed by the famous Bruno Sacco. That's why also these sideboards here are called Sacco-Bretter or Sacco boards. This design element right here, you know, so introduced by him. And of course, many other famous Mercedes vehicles before and after that were designed by Bruno Sacco. So the design here was very clean and distinctive, and also leading in the overall design in the automotive industry. And even on the technology side, this vehicle here introduced things, technologies that were used by other cars in all other segments later on. This one here, for example, the first series production airbag in 1981. Or for example, anti-slip, the ASR. So when you start driving, there is an anti-slip reduction, for example. 3-point airbags in the rear. Passenger airbag then towards the end of the whole model cycle. This vehicle also has it, for example. And the length here is at 5 meters and 16 or 203 inches, this being the long version. We can soon also show you the short wheelbase version. And interestingly, this one is still today the lightest S-Class ever, because it was built, you know, in the shadows of the oil crisis to be more efficient and, for example, in the fuel economy, and then also overall lighter, because at that point weight was very important for reducing the fuel consumption. 15-inch wheels, by the way. I mean, this is one of the biggest difference if you consider nowadays vehicles. Really tiny from a today's perspective, but I think they make the car look classy, and of course they increase the comfort because the tires have so much more dampening than in the rear. You can still see these very iconic ripped tail lamps. Originally the idea, you also maybe know it from the W123, the so to speak E-Class at that time, this was to make them cleaner, you know, also like by wind and rain and so on, but that didn't really work out, so at some point they just dropped it again. And this very, very classic sedan shape here, and they can see it, 560 SEL. And even though this one here is the top model and, so to speak, the most sought after or most sought after, this one can be bought at some 40,000–50,000 euros. So considering very relatively affordable, there are cheaper S-Class generations, actually younger ones. I found with this one very interesting that you still have this classic iconic look. At the same time, you already have modern safety systems, so that your vintage car ride is still a very safe one. And a very interesting detail, and yeah, this car is full of interesting details and also technological advancements. We once tested the 116, the predecessor of this vehicle here. You can also check out that review later on. That was like the first S-Class. And that one had the wipers like here, basically on the windshield. And here, for this efficiency gain, they put the wipers kind of like aerodynamically hidden behind here. So this one is completely hidden. This one almost, so the airflow is over the wiper, once again for better efficiency. In today's vehicles, this is like a, yeah, I mean, every Ford Fiesta has that basically, you know, but this is once again the thing that with the Mercedes S-Class in this time, Mercedes introduced technology which was then carried over by all other vehicles later on basically. And also very special was So former wipers only covered a certain portion of the windscreen. And here these new wipers covered 73% of the whole windscreen while wiping. And that was an astonishing figure at that time. When opening the hood, look very closely. Hood pops up a little bit and then there's this very tiny thing here popping out, but then you have to pull it even further and then you can open the hood and take a look at the top spec engine here. It's interesting how different they look, you know. So this one here was the 5.5 liter V8 top engine, around 280 horsepower. The top speed with this one here, 250 kilometers an hour, 155 miles per hour. And overall in the engine lineup, they had inline 6 liter petrol engines and the V8. And there were diesels as well, 5 and 6 cylinders. And the astonishing thing, today it's the other way around. At that point, the diesels were just for the Northern American market and they were not available in Germany. And today it's exactly the other way around. It's strange, right? By the way, from the whole lineup here, like the W126, this generation, about a third of the vehicles went to the States and about a third of the vehicles stayed in Germany. And only the rest third were the rest of the world. So Germany and United States are basically the markets for the W126. That's why you also see on the today's vintage car market so many vehicles in Germany and also in the United States. Very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, always a gem to look at definitely, and especially driving this one. And also like the whole mechanism, you know, how the hood is attached, and look at that, how the front grille is being lifted up with that. Yeah, beautiful thing. And it's even more interesting that this is still today the most successful S-Class generation. It was also built over the longest period of time, like for 12 years. At the same time, still the most sold, almost 900,000 pieces, so almost 1 million pieces sold of this very generation. It showed actually that at that point, this was the luxury vehicle on the market. The others came later and then also took some more market share, but indeed, there's a reason that all the statesmen, also all the Formula One drivers took this one here, because they really believed strongly this was the best vehicle on the market overall. And you maybe ask yourself, why is that and what has changed in comparison to today? Not only with Mercedes, but also to other brands. At that point, the engineers had the lead and there was basically no limit to it. So this car was supposed to be the goal of building this car was build the best vehicle, period, and find the best solutions for it. And then later on in the whole car industry, it was more dominated by the accountants and seeing how can we build this vehicle at this cost of production, you know? This became way more important than it maybe used to be. Yeah, and then we also see the results. Let's take a look at the trunk. And this is a very, very classic trunk, definitely. Hops open like this. And of course here also the emergency triangle here integrated visibly underneath it. So you don't even have to put it out. It's already visible when you just open the trunk, right? And you gotta be kidding me. Of course I also need to measure a classic car trunk, and this is 1.60 m or 63 inches in width. What the hell? I mean, the inside of the trunk is as wide as the outside of the vehicle. This is extraordinary indeed. The height here as the trolley exactly fits, and just that you can compare it to a modern car as well. Here the length is about 63 inches or 92 centimeters. Yeah, I love these vintage car trunk areas. I mean, we cannot fold anything here or something like that, but still this can house so much also liter volume wise. Pretty cool. And now watch closely and listen. Isn't it beautiful? Again. Beautiful. And of course, the classic key, and just when you really put the key in. Yeah. that's the stuff. If you enjoy that as much as I do, post it in the comments. And that's why I also could give you like some 30 seconds of ASMR right here now. Inside of the doors here with like a structuring as well, but it's kind of hard. Then a nice velour interior. Look at that, already inside of the door. It's really plush, you can push it in. These seat controls here, you know it from nowadays Mercedes, or then you know it from other cars which went here at the side of the seat, but also with the memory seating 1 and 2. Both this control, this visualization of the seat controls here, plus the memory seating, this car was the one that introduced that. And then all other Mercedes and other cars followed. Then this steering wheel here, you can see SRS airbag. This was the one already with the driver's airbag, passenger as well, soon to come. Then seats, there were fabric seats available, there were MB-Tex leatherette, and this is here the velour seat. So some kind of a microfiber style, but a little bit softier on the surface. And then in very rare shares or also animal skin. But this car showed actually that at this point, animal skin was not considered as the luxury. Even like only the driver of the Queen, for example, had, you know, in their British luxury cars, animal skin on the driver's seat for longevity at that point. But the Queen would never be sitting on animal skin at that point, you know. So, and here also Mercedes S-Class with a lot of fabric velour and also high-grade MB-Tex that still looks new today. Interesting, right? And then here with 1A9 602, close here with the head. This is also the version with the sunroof. So when I turn on the ignition already here, and this is the sunroof, and there is no like glass or something, it's just open and closed. These two states are possible because when I close it again, you can see that there's no glass or something behind it. There we go. And then here, for example, this is the sun blind with a large mirror and even with light already, like this. And this steering wheel here, as I said, one with airbag. Here, for example, with a cruise control already. Classic wipers here on the left side. It's also so much fun just to listen to it when they plop back. Watch it. Beautiful sounds the car is making, and so much on the one hand astonishing that they have a lot of electric controls, but also manual controls that were just right. For example, here for the mirror adjustment, see here, this is the direct feedback here from the mirror to this lever here, and you have to ask yourself, why not? You know, so some things are still really, really good if they are just simple. Welcome to this unique cockpit. Look at that here with the steering wheel, with the airbag from that perspective. Also here the shifting lever, automatic gearbox. Just listen to that. Classic stuff indeed. The air vents. And this is all manual work. And here, this is like, it's like a really long, thick metal piece behind it. So when you turn this one here, it's really a lot of effort. So it takes actually strength to control the fan speed here. And yeah, this one here also sounds pretty cool when you change to like where it's coming from, and you really feel that you are directly doing the stuff that is precisely happening behind that. Here also like a structured dashboard. This one also has the passenger airbag that came later in the model generation. So there's also no glove box then here. That's very interesting. Here also pretty cool here, clicking sounds for the volume, for example. And then in the lower part you have seat heating like this. And this is then the rear shade then for the very back part. More further down are the window levers, like for all kinds of windows. This is for the passenger mirror, and you can hear that, how it's moving there. So that's the side mirror, because this one you cannot manually reach as a driver. So this one is then electric. Pretty funny. There's a very thick armrest here, very soft as well. You can fold this one up, and then there's some space here underneath. There we go. And then you press this button again. But I leave it open for a moment because I have a special feature right here. And you look at that and think like, what exactly is this actually? So here you can have different numbers, and then you also have some buttons in the front. Now listen to that. When I'm moving it back to 0, you hear that air is coming out, and this is actually the lumbar support, and you can control the different letters here for the area where the lumbar support is, and then you can pump it up y'all in the seat. So a very exclusive feature here, and yeah, interesting solution, and that you really hear then when the air is going out again. Yeah, it's such a unique thing. And also, of course, when you turn the key here from 0 and then to really start the engine, and then you can also take a look at the instruments. And I really love analog instruments, gotta say that. Here, of course, with the RPM there we go, and the typical speedometer. Yeah, sometimes I wish these days back, because it just makes such a classy atmosphere. And not to forget to take a look at the hood from this perspective and seeing the Mercedes star there in the front. And look at that in the rear. I'm controlling that from the front electrically, this rear shade. Pretty cool feature to have this one electric at that point. Rear seats, and this is here the long wheelbase version. That's why we also have legroom than here. Although tall people are driving, it will look completely different in the short wheelbase version. And then here you can see here structure at the inside of the doors. Also there's a nice velour fabric here. And this was a thing that you had all over the place, basically here, these ashtrays and also the cigarette lighters. This was considered as high-class luxury when every seating place here, every seat had a cigarette lighter actually. And here, electric windows, heated seats, and this one here is like the most interesting one. Electric control of the rear bench. Look at that. Wow. This is crazy, right? So here, this one goes forward, the back part goes a little bit more behind, and I can still sit like this. Of course, this one could also be pushed more forward and for more space as in the right rear. But yeah, very astonishing that we had this functionality at that period of time. And then I can show you even more from that. And you can see even in the rear we have these springs underneath, that it's that you have like this very plush atmosphere like this. This is behind the driver's seat, for example. Headroom is close but works with 189 6'2". And the thing is that on the one hand you have these springs here that also damp a little bit, like while being on the road and while driving and so on. At the same time, you gotta say, yeah, they look plush and comfortable, but modern ergonomics of today's cars are definitely also better. So yes, it's all plush and the fabrics are nice and so on, but the ergonomics is also better nowadays in the rear, for example. But I mean, it's astonishing when you think about that this car is at the day of the shooting here. So shooting is 2025, 25 years plus 9 years. So it's 34 years. This was a very quick calculation. 34 years old, and this fabric is still really nice and soft. That is pretty cool. Here the armrest can be pulled out like this. That is a proper armrest. That really tells. Yeah, look at that. The armrest itself is like it's like a pillow indeed. So that is something. Yeah, definitely here feeling like a boss even in 1991. And whereas our grey vehicle was the top spec vehicle, this one here is the base spec vehicle. Here you can see a champagne metallic vehicle, so a very beautiful color, golden color. This one from 1988, and this one is a 300 SE, and there's no L. That means this one is the short wheelbase version, so to speak, an entry level version. And you can't believe it that Mercedes Classic just bought this vehicle here for 15,000 euros and put some money in it to restore it to a little bit better state. But look at that, I mean, this kind of vehicle at that price, it's unbelievable, isn't it? I think the short wheelbase also looks really nice, just from the proportions and so on. Of course, you don't have so much legroom on the inside, but the design here, once again, also in the rear here with these gaps in the taillight. Yeah, I think it's a really classic still, even as a base version. And this golden color makes it even more special. Let's quickly take a look at the interior as well here, because it fits to this golden exterior color. Look at these, the fabric seats in this golden style. And there's another technological difference you can see. I told you about the airbags earlier, and here we do not have any airbags. So there you can see we do have a glove box, also with some cup holders when you fold them down. That's interesting, right? No dampening, you know, as we have maybe from today's glove boxes. And this one here, 1988, as I said, there was an airbag available at that time already, but this one does not have the airbag. So this is the classic steering wheel, actually, the base steering wheel. But the comfort itself, the seats are not, let's say, too different. Here you can see also the springs. Once again, this is the most funny aspect. So you can even basically buy this as a base version. However, if I would get one, I would always look out for some with the airbags, just as a safety thing. But the base color scheme is so unique here, isn't it? You know, look at the ceiling here also with the fabric, and I really can't believe that this one is sold at 15,000 euros. I mean, the state of the vehicle here is actually pretty good. Definitely gotta bear in mind if you think about using this car for more people, and that was also the reason why the L versions were so popular. You can even see that from here, you know. So when I'm driving in the front, there's hardly any legroom in the rear. You have to remember that the size of today's vehicles is usually like a segment higher, you know, above that. So yeah, vehicles have been getting longer and longer and wider and so on. But I would be looking forward to your comment if you would go for the high spec vehicle or if you would also be happy here with the low spec. And another special version here for you. This is here the Coupé, because that version was also available as C126, and I put the windows down now that you can see here the spectacular effect without the B-pillar. Pretty cool, isn't it? So this has a very unique styling to it. I mean, some more S-Class coupés were following, not at this very current generation. In the rear it looks pretty much the same, and maybe you can quickly take a look at the interior, because this one looks also pretty cool. Here with the fabric seats once again, velour on the outside, also a little bit on the inside here, different color. So also a pretty unique interior and great to look at it, especially when there's no B-pillar here. How do you like this one? And even at that time, look at that here, the Coupé. Start the vehicle. There's an automatic seatbelt reacher. Wow, look at that, and it's super long. I mean, even longer than the ones we have nowadays, right? So, good comfort feature. Sport mode. Oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have any sport mode. And doesn't need it. Let's go with this V8 power here. Nice subtle sound in this one. Welcome to the W126 here with the 560 SEL. So 126 is the model description and 560 then the individual version here, the 560 SEL, driving the top version. And you of course have already steering support here, servo steering. However, it is still, in comparison to modern cars, still heavier to steer, so to speak. The first thing you notice in comparison to modern cars is that the seats are way softer in the way they give way, you know, also in the corners and so on. And, you know, also like you hop in the seats a little bit when there are some bumps on the road and so on. And that makes this a very unique feeling, definitely. I feel that it's very silent if you think about that this car is essentially 34 years old, you know, and yeah, this was one of the latest that was built last year of this generation, but still, considering this is more silent than some of the other cars that are on the road nowadays, it's a lot of fun here to put it in the roundabouts and doing some S cornering and so on. The suspension and also the wheels, I mean, the wheels are really small, tiny in comparison to nowadays cars, and that makes also more, let's say, wobbly ride in a way, so it's not stiff. And you see here, like these older generations, you can shake them up in a way easier. At the same time, the steering is also more forgiving, so there's not so much happening in the low degree angles, but it's actually still feeling, you know, you can feel what you're doing, you know. That's what I mean, actually. And here we're driving like 70 kilometers an hour, or you feel like, yeah, shifting. It's like something like, it's going forward like this. It's actually a comfortable experience, you know. I do feel that the ergonomics of modern seats can be way better than these ergonomics. So although they are softer, modern seats can be better in the comfort because of the base ergonomics. You also feel that the AC unit is changing depending on the speed. So now Leah is freezing a little bit. Here we can turn a little bit warmer then, like this. Yeah, the manual controls. So you always have to adapt it to the speed then yourself, basically. But AC was, of course, also very rare these days, especially when this car was introduced, actually. And it is really still a daily driver. It's possible, you know. So although it is a vintage car and it's still got this very distinctive vintage look on the exterior.
Oh.
Yeah,
Floaty.
It has a floaty ride, right? It's pretty cool. But it's still, it you know, in a way, already drives like a modern car. Yes, as I said, the suspension is softer, the seats are softer, you have to steer a little bit more, but it's not that you say, oh, you have such an old vehicle that it's kind of like a, you know, crap feeling or something. You know what I mean? So it feels already very refined. And that's the thing with buying a vintage car that was from this upper class segment. So this car was so ahead in time, ahead of all the other cars, that years after, it's still, you know, on a very high level. You know what I mean? So, and if we would just now, of course me not, but if Leah would maybe close her eyes, and then I ask her like, what's the year this car was being built? I don't think she could ever say, this is 1991. It could be a completely modern, just if you just listen and feel what's happening to you, how soft you're being treated by the vehicle and how calm everything is, this is really astonishing. And this is also when I was driving the 116, that felt more vintage car alike, you know, and this one here already such a leap forward in how modern this car is feeling. But at the same time, you still have vintage car fun in the way the car is handling, you know. I do drive this one calmer and with less speed than I would do with a modern vehicle. Here, for example, I could drive 20 kilometers an hour more than I'm driving here at this moment, but it's not as agile as modern cars, you know. Maybe like a modern S-Class, even though it's larger, I could easily drive with 100 kilometers an hour here and it would feel half the speed. So because the suspension is softer and the wheels are smaller and so on, it doesn't feel as agile at higher speeds, but that's also not the main purpose of this vehicle, you know. You don't have that sporty character that you would have from a modern S-Class, but you can more enjoy the exclusive character. Look at the front there. More than with any other modern car, you can see that standing star there on top of the hood and how the hood is bending, for example. And you just enjoy that when you're sitting here and you're looking to the outside. Now in city traffic, let's see how it feels like when we're driving a little bit slower. Of course, when parking in and out, you sometimes have to work it a little bit more. Sometimes when we're changing speeds or when we're on the brakes or I release the brakes again, there's one of the modern speed cameras there. Oh, you won't get me. So then you sometimes hear like some rattling from the sills and so on, which is perfectly normal at the age that the car is actually. I can just stress again this silence in the vehicle. And I mean, yeah, especially when we're driving at slower speeds, we can also leave some air in. That's beautiful, right? I mean, it's really a vehicle where you can enjoy vintage car driving. At the same time, you can have modern safety. Yes, you drive it a little bit slower, of course, than modern vehicles because the suspension is not that agile and sporty and so on. But this car delivers everything. You know, you can drive it with 4 or 5 adults. You can, is it? Yeah, no, it's no, just a 4, right? I didn't pay attention to it earlier. This is for 4, right?
Yeah.
It's for 4. This is for 4, yeah. So registration for 4.
For four.
For 4. And of course, a large trunk. You can even do a holiday trip with it, but at the same time, you can use it as a daily driver. That's the cool thing, you know. And even more interesting is that at that point, this was a super luxury vehicle. But now with this exterior, which is more understatement in today's sense, you can drive this one also, let's say, through 20 quarters of Berlin and you won't be considered a snob. This is a vehicle that is high class, but at the same time, understatement, you know? This car works for everyone. When we're driving around with this vehicle, everyone would give thumbs up, you know, no matter where you come from, in which situation you are. This is likable to everyone, this vehicle. That's also making it so cool. And hey, you can even, I mean, we're driving now 60, I can go a little bit faster. This open top is not that loud, so you can even enjoy some countryside trips now and drive here with the open sunroof. That's a beautiful feeling indeed. Shall we push it a little bit further, this engine? Maybe just a little bit, right? Here maybe down the hill a little bit and feel the sensation of speed. Like 0 to 100 is about 7 seconds, just over 7 seconds. And maybe we help this car a little bit with going downhill. Maybe from 30, let's go. There we go. This is 80. Close the roof, you know. That we can better hear the engine actually. It's a very, very beautiful acceleration, you know, like this raw power. It's not about the best performance, but it's about... So look at the needle, like the tachometer needle, where it's really, really linear where it goes up, and that's just a beautiful feeling. This car feels sovereign, you know, from the engine is, okay, I don't need to be the quickest sport car, but I have a lot of displacement, I have a lot of cylinders, and I can use the power when I need it. At the same time, the acceleration is in a region, you know, where you can still say, hey, this feels like a modern car in acceleration. So yeah, beautiful job. And to me, the most surprising thing is that although it's literally an old car, because it was placed in this, like such an upper segment and it was so refined, and at that time, best car in the world, it still feels so good to drive today. So what do we take away? I mean, I love these vintage vehicles just from the looks, and I think this is a very special thing about the W126 is that this one here looks vintage car, but it already has the modern safety equipment, at least if you have a car with that one spec. This makes it so special, and you can use this one here as a daily driver. At the same time, you can also maybe get one without or with some less electronics. That's also better for the longevity. And I think it's also pretty cool that you can get these ones here for relatively low prices, getting an S-Class and so on. So this makes this generation so special. And because it is sold so often, it's like the most sold generation, also the availability of parts and so on is also better. The 116 is in a way more classic from the looks. You can also enjoy this episode now, definitely. I also enjoyed the driving here. I mean, it's very emotional, and you cannot really compare it to nowadays cars, because we also gotta admit, nowadays cars, they drive better, they're even safer, they have better driving dynamics, they're better in the ergonomics, they are more comfortable. Nowadays cars are better in so many respects. But this one definitely still has so much more character, and there are also some solutions where you can maybe also go back to. In case of Mercedes, high-end luxury seats which are not animal skin, as we see here, which was the prevailing trend at this moment. And maybe also, once again, more simplicity, putting things on real buttons, on real switches, and focusing again on reliability, because this generation was also famous for its reliability. So I think that the manufacturers can learn from these past vehicles to go back to the roots a little bit and then combine it with modern things we also want in new modern cars, and then find this new optimum in the car industry. What do you think about that? Tell me in the comments, and now tune into the 116 or other vintage car episodes.